Hello all, welcome to Gelvin Valley, wonderful creation by Wild Wild Wes for Army Simulator 15. You know, we're kind of in the middle of a little experiment here of picking up the grass at the edge of these fields. I've bought several of them, as we saw over the past couple episodes, and I decided I could almost hear Russell chewing me out for making an uneconomical decision again to cut the grass around the edges of the fields. And well, that's kind of what I've done. And you know what? Well, you've seen it. I haven't hardly harvested diddly squat in terms of much in the way of feed, but it is what it is. So once I started on that course, I figured I would keep after it. And I got another full trailer load here. Right at the tail end of the last episode, I managed to get it full also. I don't know if I have another trailer out there or not. Maybe I do. I've taken care of the far fields. Have just the one left, and nor do I know if there is even room in our feeder over here. So I have another mod in here, a placeable heap. It's been a long time since I've used one of those. I think there's a couple different versions out there. This one here, well, I don't remember who made it. Hey, did that car stop for the sheep? That's pretty cool. Anyway, if I'm not able to fit all the grass in here, I think I'll make a heap and kind of pile it up. I gotta use up those bales over there too. How much do I have, incidentally? Let's just take a peek. 40,000 for all 600 sheeps. Alright. Well, we'll see if I can put this in here. I know it only lets me hold a certain amount. $600 is a lot of sheep, so I'm assuming it'll let me put it here. Seems to be. What does it say the limit is? It doesn't say. Whatever. Well, maybe I'll get lucky, and if need be, I can always leave the thing sitting here too. So, yeah, okay, it took the whole thing, so I think maybe there's possibly another trailer. We'll find out. And then I'll be getting back, hopefully, to the work of tearing out the fields that we now have. There'll be rocks to pick up. I'll have to cultivate them. There's still a fair amount of work to do before we can get them planted. And so much to do. And, you know, I don't even know how much wool we have. It tells us how much is on the current pallet, you know, when we check the I menu. But I would hope it is adding to the total much quicker with 600 than it did with just a handful. So I can get down in here. Let me see if I can see. We're going by the sheep farm here. Alright, there's a few pallets there. Still nothing to write home about. And I somehow think, oh shoot, that wasn't good. I just gave myself some more damage. Yeah, at some point I gotta take myself to the repair shop. Anyway, I was thinking that when you fast forward overnight, I have a feeling that wool doesn't materialize. Just kind of curious. But the feed probably disappears. I bet that goes. Maybe I can fix that at some point. Alright. Here we go, picking it up. Maybe this was a worthless exercise, but I don't know. At least this way we got to see kind of around the place a little bit, kind of get a picture of our fields, and see kind of what we're up against. Oh shoot! My goodness. Keyboard steering at its finest. There we go. Well, you know what? It probably would help if I lifted. There we go. So I have a feeling that everybody is tired of railroads. Oh shoot, and I gotta put it back down, you idiot. And it would help if I could see what I'm doing, and I can't. So go up a little bit. Everybody's probably tired of railroads, like I say, and you know that's one thing that West didn't build into Gelvin Valley here is a railroad, and by Farm Sim 15 they had railroads. You know, I think they introduced them maybe in, well, no, I think more up close and personal use of them started in Farm Sim 15. But they've been in here since Farm Sim 11, maybe. You know, the distant train or whatever. That functionality's been here. But the ability to sell to the railroad, get some extra profit, send the cars off, or whatever you could do, that didn't come to be until Farm Sim 15. And you'll notice there is no railroad here in Gelvin Valley. Gelvin Valley is pristine, undefiled of rail. And Wes said he modeled the area sort of on, oh, I was just reading it, I can't pronounce it, somewhere in Northern Ireland. And it'll be interesting to ask him sometime, and maybe if he hears this, he'll answer whether there is any rail networks up there, or you know what his decision process was as to why he chose to not include it. I don't know. You know, one drawback to it is it had to be straight, and as you can see with everything we've done here in Gelvin Valley, there is nary a straight line anywhere. You know, so if you put the thing in, you know, you can't bend the rail around a hill or anything. You pretty much have to shove it into a hillside with a tunnel or something, and leave it at that. So maybe it's because of the constraints, you know, that he opted not to put it in here. But anyway, everybody is tired of railroads and maps they can't see, which I was referring to. I think we'll be done fiddling with that. But in terms of a topic to talk about here tonight, I actually have one quite a bit more sober. I've wanted to visit about it for a while, but it's just one of those things that's hard to talk about. It's kind of like a couple years ago, I lost a dear friend. Well, we all did. You know, Eustace Farmer, Atomic 67 as he was called later. He passed away, that was in January of 23? Yeah, I think it was 23. And shortly on the heels of that, I lost a brother-in-law. And you know, as a person gets older, I suppose this is what you start to expect. And you know, we've probably all heard some old-timers say that, well, all his friends are dead, and you know, I have no more purpose or no desire to stay here. And you know, to those of us that are younger and hearing stuff like that, you know, we maybe wonder how, you know, there's plenty to live for. You know, why would someone feel that way? But then when you get walloped a few times in life, maybe maybe we start to see how people could feel that way. And, well, I mean, the long and the short of it is here, it's March here as I record this, and back in January 8th, to be exact, I lost an uncle. And, maybe uncles aren't always the closest family relation, if you will, particularly one who isn't related to you. We all have in-laws, outlaws, if you will, or, ones that have your family name versus not. This one here was actually on my wife's side of the house, and he was just a special man. And I know, when someone passes, it seems like even if the guy was a hardened criminal, everybody can think of something nice to say about the deceased. Usually. But dang it, sometimes losses just hurt. And they're special people. They're genuinely special people that touch a lot of people's lives in ways that maybe aren't readily appreciated because they're just always there, and you take it for granted that they're always going to be there. You don't even think about the possibility of losing someone or losing that influence, that you have in your life. Or at least that's kind of how it seems to me. And that's kind of how this particular uncle was. He came from a fairly, well, I was going to say a rough background. Probably to hear him say it, he would say it's because of his own personal choices, maybe some rebellion he did in his early life. He grew up in a Christian home, had a family, mom and dad. To my knowledge, they stayed together, siblings. So he had a lot of things going for him. But at some point in there, he left home and moved several states away, and at some point got married and had some children, got divorced, married again, moved again. He was a bricklayer, so he was kind of dealing with a rough crew a good lot of the time. I think that's all. Not to say all bricklayers are rough, but sometimes in the trades, you get some people that have some mileage on them. And then later in his life, I think I live in Oregon, he went through California. I think he was in Idaho at some point. I had never heard of him or seen him until I was, oh goodness, I was maybe 19, 20, and he all of a sudden showed up at our church, and I don't remember how he came there. I mean, I'm in the same denomination that he grew up in, and maybe he just came on a whim. I don't know. I mean, we were in the middle of building a brand new church building at the time, and he showed up, and of course he had bricklaying skills. Our church, as it happened to be, was made out of brick, so he helped with that. And I remember getting acquainted with him, but had no idea at the time, just the trajectory my life would have, and somewhere in relation to him, that is, somewhere in there I got married. I think I was 21 when I got married. Wife, started having children, and in the meantime, he continued coming. His second wife ended up passing away. I talk about tragic, for those that are married. I think we talked about this dynamic before. They don't tell you when you get married. Nobody ever talks about the fact that unless you die in a plane crash or car wreck or something, one of you is going to go first. And, none of us are prepared to be the one left behind or to be there to pick up the pieces and that kind of thing. Well, he was. His second wife died, and I think it was in the middle of the night, when they were in bed, and I don't know if he woke up and she just was gone. I can't imagine having to deal with something like that. It's but I mean, people they do, and those kinds of things unfortunately happen all the time. So when that happened, he moved to, all right, there's a small dab of grass down across the hill. I'm going to go see if I can pick up the rest of it. And if we have 5 days in there, yeah, we ought to be set for grass for a little while at least. But he moved from Idaho to Oregon and was here a year or two, I don't remember how long, and eventually married my wife's aunt. She, I think she was in her 40s at the time, basically had resigned herself. Oh shoot, I got that on a rental contract. I've been paying rent on that thing this whole time. Oh wow. What am I going to say? I got $100,000 in the bank. She had basically, I think, resigned herself to living life without a spouse. He came along. They got married. They didn't have any children, of course. But over time, he became a different man than what he was. And to anyone listening who understands, from a Christian perspective, the life change that can happen when a life is given to Christ and submission to God happens. A person's life changes for the better. And I know there's all sorts of stories out there about hypocrisy and this and that, and all that does is show the weakness of mankind and their need, frankly, for Christ. But be that as it may, he became a totally different man and was just one of the most loving people, I've ever met or had anything to do with in my life. And I didn't even realize at the time, when he got married to my wife's aunt, just how much of an influence he would be, on my wife and I, on our family, on our kids. It was so funny. When my wife and I were pregnant with our first child, he was so excited that he was temporarily confused. He said, "I'm going to be a grandpa." Of course he wasn't a grandpa, but what it shows is where his heart was in terms of how he viewed us. He told me many times, over the years that he and his wife saw my wife as if she was a daughter to them. And there's reasons for how that came to be, with some other things that have happened in our life that I won't just get into here, but it was very close. And there's a part of me, when he passed, that feels like, and don't get me wrong, I have an awesome dad, a wonderful father. I couldn't ask for a better one. But I know I've told more than one person when he passed, it felt like I lost my second dad, or a type of father figure. And I don't think this is too unrelatable to anyone. We all have mentors of types in our life. We may not even seek them out, but suffice it to say, we have them. And it's, it's the people we choose to associate with and the impact they have, on our lives. And yeah, it's just I sit here trying to talk it through. Is that something down there I can pick up? I don't know if that's something in there or not. I don't want to get grass out of here ever again. I promise. I think I've picked up most of it. Alright, I'm gonna get out of here before I get stuck. Oh yes, I gotta get up here. Climb the hill. Climb the hill, please. Hang on. I should use a bigger tractor for this. Oh well. Little Petey is doing just fine. So, I miss the man. Now it's a couple months, and, honestly, this time of year, he passed. Well, that's really good. He passed in a time of year when I am very busy. This time of year, even as I do this, I'm fresh off a day where I've worked 14 hours. I just wanted to come out here. It's therapy to me to sit and record a little bit. It's probably therapy for anybody to have to listen to. So, I've been busy and haven't had a lot of time to think about it, and I don't know if that's good or bad or neutral. But sometimes I have been thankful for the hours, that keep me occupied at work and, where it just doesn't sit on my mind. Now, the same can't be said of, the aunt, that he left behind. And she has some health difficulties and, is just asked a number of times why would God take her husband before her? And it's true. I would have the same question. I don't know the answer, and nobody but God knows. She was, from all appearances, in much worse health than he was. And yeah, he was her caretaker. She's able to walk and get around. She can still drive, but it's really difficult for her. And now, with him gone and with him there, they did all sorts of things. They had an RV. He was a very outgoing person, a people person, and so they volunteered out at a state park at the coast, and just because he loved people. He loved being around them, and so he volunteered in places where, he could touch people's lives. And now that all comes to a halt. And so she isn't really able anymore to do those things, without someone there. So, they used to travel to the Midwest periodically, to Arizona each winter, and so all those things now, they're done. Let me see if I can put some more in. Alright. Okay. Let's head across the canyon. Here we go. Drag out our chisel. Oh my goodness, I forgot that I was renting this thing. Silly. Let me see, do I need to allow create fields? Oh. So that's what we're gonna be doing. Oops. Unfold. Yeah, gotta be real careful on the outer edge. There we go. these permanent weeds on the sides here. Alright, try to stay out as much as I can. Make a clean edge. But for Auntie, who's left behind, and especially with, nothing going on, there's a lot of time to do a lot of thinking and a lot of worrying, and yeah, that pretty well sums it up. And we're doing our best, to be there for her, to help her, take care of her. And, for example, coming up soon, we'll be helping her to clean out and dispose of, the RV and some of that kind of thing. And, she has just said straight up, and it's, this is to her credit. Sometimes, people, they will need help, but they don't ever want to ask for it. Maybe there's too much pride, whatever you want to call it, fear. And to her credit, she has said, I need some help. And has just said straight out, things are stressful to her. It's causing her anxiety. And maybe it's a guy thing, I don't know. Men, a lot of times, we don't even want to admit that. And we'd sooner go on our own and not have to rely on the help and goodness of other people to bail us out, or however you want to say it. So we're trying to be helpful, but I wish there was a way. There's a rock. I'm an accountant. That's what I do for a living. So one of the ways I tried to help, because it was stressful to her, is, doing her annual income tax return. I had done it years and years ago, hadn't touched it in many years, although our accounting firm, I think, did it. So, I was happy to do that and glad if it would help alleviate a little bit of stress or whatever, that she was feeling. But I don't know how it is with you. I mean, I know in my own life, we all have our worry box, and as soon as one worry is addressed, it seems like another one is right there to rear its head and take its place. So I kind of think that is going to affect our aunt. Let's see, is that a clean? You know what? That ain't half bad. Alright, now that we got that, I'm going to head over here. This field is in two parts. And even if you get help on things, it's just never, ever going to be the same. And you know that. And your mind probably, I don't know what the mind thinks. I know what I went through when, Eustace Farmer passed. I was used to talking to him every day. And all of a sudden, that was gone. Just in an instant. And I know for a while, I was kind of thinking in my mind, well, maybe this is just some prank somebody's playing on me, and it'll go a few days here, and all of a sudden he'll pop me a message on the Discord app, just like we used to. And, it's like your mind lies to you or something. Now, I knew he had passed. I mean, his widow had told me, but still those thoughts kind of came to mind, and that's just, with someone I considered a dear friend. I can't imagine, for a spouse or wife or husband or something, trying to process that and going through maybe some of the same kinds of thoughts, well. And it's kind of like, here last night, we took Aunt out to pizza just to spend some time with her and talk through a few things, like this RV to clean up and get it ready to be sold or whatever she wants to do with it. And, so we went out to pizza, then we went to her home, and, she's fumbling with the keys to go in. The house is dark, and I can't tell you how many times, we've been there when Uncle was still alive, and he would just appear from around a corner, or he'd be out in his easy chair, and you could hear him, come on in, and it's almost like when you step into this dark house, it's like, well, surely, we'll hear him, won't we? And of course, you don't. So, but the mind, the mind, which is a powerful thing, plays, these dastardly tricks on you, on us, and it just isn't so. So I imagine, Auntie is going through some of these things and trying to come to terms with it just like, we all are. I know it's probably going to be rough for me once, my busy time ends, which typically happens, I don't know, end of April. Speaking of time ending, there's the bell, and the bell, every time I hear it, I think of Eustace Farmer. He's the one that gave it to me, so I knew when to stop boring people on my little YouTube videos. But at the moment, just trying to come to terms with another loss. And it is what it is. And, I mentioned earlier the change that his life had in it. And that's where, it helps me go on, even in the face of a loss, is as a Christian, I believe with all my heart that I'll get to see him again. And I believe that because I believe what the Bible says, and it has that in it. And so that gives me hope, gives me a lot of comfort, and helps me keep going. And frankly, if I didn't have that worldview or belief, I don't know what I would do. But these are the deep questions of life, and I realize, others will have a different belief system, but that's mine, and regardless of, what we may believe in what is to come, it still doesn't always take care of the here and now, and that's what we're still coming to terms with. Anyway, thank you so much for coming and listening to an old man dawdle around here on wonderful Gelvin Valley. We still have a piece of work to do in here and some fields to plant, but hopefully the sheep are just a little less hungry. Y'all have a wonderful day. I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.